Our planet, protected by magnetic fields and various etheric zones, is like a Noah's Ark, carrying abundant varieties of living organisms through the hostile environment of limitless space. Self-contained and isolated, all organisms on our planet are exquisitely intertwined and mutually dependent. Our sphere supports and nourishes us while continuing its timeless journey. If our species is to continue to exist, we have no other choice but to strive for a mutually nurturing relationship with our ark, the planet Earth. Our process of exploiting the resources is disrupting and destroying the subtle and exquisite processes of nature. It is one thing to have a planet in which we all live together in peace, quite another to presume we have a planet large enough to withstand constant conflict and competition. Our past choices have corrupted the atmosphere, polluted the waters, caused us to develop nuclear products for which we have little understanding and even less appreciation of their long-term effects. We strive blindly, ignoring the overwhelming evidence and warnings of our impending collapse. We have a choice between abundance or the specter of a dead planet. As we approach the 21st century, the choices we make now will determine not only the quality of life in the next century, but its very existence. These are the words of Manly P. Hall, octogenarian, sage, philosopher, humanist, and idealist, who has been lecturing and writing about the human condition for over 60 years. Let's join him as he speaks for the young who will inhabit the 21st century.
My beginnings in remembering this country begin with the return of the Scottish Regiment of the Black Watch from the Boer War in 1903. That was an event in those days. The whole town was out. They came in on boats through Ontario, and the head of them was the Mounted Cavalry Band, a complete band all mounted on horses. Behind them came the Scotties in their kilts and their big beaver hats, and everyone was rejoicing. War was over. Now peace could return to the land. But unfortunately, if it was visited, it was a short trip. Actually, within a few months, more trouble started. In those days, American politics were comparatively simple. I shook hands with President-elect Taft on the steps of a hotel in South Dakota. He was a large and ample man with a vest made of starched white cloth with red polka dots in it. The polka dots were not to be forgotten. After getting through with that, I used to sit next to Woodrow Wilson in the theaters when he attended every Saturday afternoon. We all went to the theater, everyone sat down quietly, and suddenly all the lights went out. And a few minutes later, the lights came back on, and the president and his bodyguard were in the center loge. Those were the things that were happening then, and they keep on happening. Actually, by the time we get to Woodrow Wilson, lots of troubles were brewing. Many difficulties were in the air. I was living in Washington, D.C., and the leaders of a dozen nations were in and out every week or two, trying to solve the problem that ended in World War I. World War I, we finally were victorious, but left behind it, when it departed, prohibition, gangsterism, all kinds of exploitation, and all kinds of financial stress and strain. It was a very hard period. Woodrow Wilson tried to put over his League of Nations, but no one would have it. Other countries signed, but we never did. Incidentally, the League of Nations was interesting because it began on this continent. The League of Nations began in the 14th century, before the coming of the first colonial tourists. The League of Nations was the league of the 5 nations of Indian peoples. And had that league begun 50 years earlier, we would have had a very great deal more trouble trying to take a foothold here. The league was based on a simple problem: one roof over all people, one great big teepee for everyone, which was the idea of the sky being the roof of a universal house, and all people living together in the same house should be brothers. It didn't go at that time, and it didn't go later. Came the Depression as the final result of the upheaval of war. That was followed by more difficulties. Time went on, and the 20th century, which was to be a most wonderful time, grew more and more difficult. World War II. And by that time, most of the world was at war. War raging everywhere, crime increasing, problems multiplying, and no solutions. Unfortunately, at the present moment, there does not seem to be too much substantiation for this idea that it can be solved so quickly. But much can be done in the face of the fact that for over 100 years, nothing has been done that actually helped to solve or bring peace to a troubled world. To meet this, therefore, it seems we have to get at new ideas. And you young people growing up in this new century are the ones who must have these ideas. You must have the courage to live up to them and the integrity to protect them. There has to be change. If there is not change, there is nothing but disaster. We cannot go on as we were. In the 19th century, we had plenty of land. We no longer have it. We had plenty of water. We no longer have it. Little by little, the stamina of the people has been undermined. So to do something about it, we have to start with this new generation coming in. We can share with it some of the wisdom we have gained, but we must watch them put this to work and do the things that we have been unable to do. There are great potential possibilities, but if we don't stop thinking of nothing but fun and profit, we're going to be in the same problem we have been in the world for the last 4,000 years. So if we have things to learn, and we must learn them. Now, when we get down to problems of what to do about these things, how does it all start? Are we going to be able to legislate at Reformation? Are we going to be able to elect people who are going to clean the mess and give us back the integrities we have lost? Not very likely. The final solution of the whole problem rests upon personal integrity. There must be more people who honestly want to live in a better world. If there are not more people, there will not be a better world. Now, looking over the various possibilities, I came on one that seemed to be rather important, and that is the importance of education in the solution of all these problems. But what do I mean by education? Do I mean the kind of schooling we've been getting now? Well, not exactly. It won't work out. But I mean education as teaching basic principles of life. There can be no education without ethics. Unless we believe in right, there is no way of living in a right world. If we do not believe in moralities, we can never live in a moral atmosphere. And unless we continue to develop virtues, we will drown in our own vices. To make this a part of a school system seems to be very interesting. Now, I go back to Egypt, a very colorful country, for certain principles to discuss. In Egypt, the Egyptian was not born a citizen. This is interesting. When you came into the world, you were an Egyptian, but you were not a citizen of Egypt. You might have been born on the steps of the pyramid, but you were still not a citizen. This was because it was deemed that citizenship, mature participation in the labors of the state, required dedication, enlightenment, consecration, and, if necessary, self-sacrifice. Now, children in Egypt, up to around 15, 16 years old, wore a child lock of hair. It kind of hung down over the left eye and down onto the shoulder, a thin lock of hair. And this was called the child lock. And as long as that lock of hair was there, that person was not responsible for knowledge which he did not possess. He could not be blamed for mistakes that he did not know better than to make. But there came a ceremony finally, and in the presence of all concerned, the priests of Thebes and Luxor and Memphis gathered together those who were aspirants to become citizens of Egypt. And they had a great ceremony and invoked the gods and made these young people accept the responsibility of Egyptian citizenship. And from the records we still have of those old times, we get some key to what the instructions were. The first instruction was, you must obey the laws of the gods of Egypt. You must obey the laws of Osiris and Amenhotep. You must obey the laws of the state. Unless you are a true law abider, you cannot be a citizen. You had to be truthful, honest in your weights and measures, kind to those in need, helpful for the forlorn and the sick, forever charitable. And at this point was introduced the great negative confession of the Book of the Dead. When the Egyptian died and went into the other world, they believed in Egypt that he had to answer to the gods of the underworld for his reputation on earth. He had to be able to give a statement that he had kept the 600 rules by which the Egyptian regulated his conduct. Maybe he couldn't keep them all, but he did the best he could. But he was working always under the pressure of being a good person, a dedicated person, and an Egyptian was an individual who could stand out upon all sides and prove that in every way he was trustworthy, honorable, honest, enlightened, and kind. After he had taken all these obligations so forth, the little lock of hair was cut off, and the child became a man or a woman, became an Egyptian citizen, having the privileges and rights of a citizen. But without this bond, it could not happen. So let's move this forward into another type of world and see what we have here now. Supposing we had not here a citizenship by birth, but a citizenship by dedication. Supposing instead of being born an American, we went to school, the lower grades, middle school, and finally graduated from high school. At the time of high school graduation, then citizenship would be a matter of consideration. When the American boy or girl decides to go in for a life of government or statesman's craft, they should not be out merely to get money. There should be reasonable wages, proper salaries, proper things necessary, but everything should be pointed to the fact that the citizen is a servant of the needs of the people. Now, if we began producing people who at the age of 14 or 15, Americans, they wanted to help to build this country, it would supply them not only with opportunity, but with excellent recompense and everything that was necessary. They could have a brilliant and lasting career and be honored in the files and records of the nation. This has got to be gradually brought down to a point where we will be able to trust the development of a class of leadership that can find no advantage in deceit or deception, who cannot be easily bribed or over-influenced, nor can they be placed in a position where they know nothing about the subject. They are preparing for a life of statesmanship, and when this comes along, one of the great needs of the country of the present time would be more easily met with. So there's a possibility of thinking of gradually building up, at least in part, into our curriculum, a course of instruction on how to be a citizen, what is really demanded of it, and why a citizen cannot break the rules every 15 minutes and then vote. We cannot create a country without ethics. We cannot eliminate from our curriculum every bit of idealism and expect it to work. In the last 50 years, we have seen several noble experiments in atheism. They've all turned out to be miserable failures. Napoleon summed it up very well when he said, an atheist can win a battle, but only a believer in God can run a nation. And this is very largely the problem we have. There are no basic ideals that are held in common. This does not mean that we have to become theologically minded, but we have to have some beliefs and value. We have to believe in something beyond and above the almighty dollar. If we do not have a belief above the dollar, we will soon erode away the dollar with everything else. In this particular problem, we need people who have a solid belief that the human being is a creature intended for a purpose, that we are not merely something too new and too noble to be put in the zoo. We are a creation with mind, with resources, with ideals, with dreams. We have created great art and great music, but we have also created monumental crime. We have all the wisdom of the past, and all we can do with it is create nuclear weapons. We've got to get a different attitude toward life. We should believe in the ultimate triumph of right. We should continue to believe that mercy is stronger than hate. We should come to know that we will never have an enduring civilization until we can build it on peace and not on war. We need gradual reformation, not by law on the outside, but by the principles of integrity on the inside. There are in this world now probably something better than 3.5 billion people who believe in some form of religious principles. These people we must recognize. We must not view everyone who differs from us as being wrong. We must view the individual who has no ideals as the one who is wrong. We must recognize the importance of having principles and standing with them, if necessary, suffering for them. And in most of the nations which have been dominated by completely economic policies, idealism is coming back. Again, the churches are being opened because the country cannot exist without them. But the churches are symbolical. The church opening is our own opening. It is the individual opening his heart and mind to a solutional program better and deeper and more enduring than anything that he can get from the outside. He must learn to depend upon integrities. He must recognize that the universe is governed by law. Even the scientists will tell him that. And laws are very definite. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. For centuries we have been sowing a hurricane, and we are reaping a hurricane. The time has come when he cannot continue to do these things. We must begin to think in terms of solution. these problems will not go away. We cannot brush them under the edge of the rug. Every morning the paper or the television set tells us of another country involved in hopeless confusion. And we try to meet this great challenge of civilization by building more nuclear weapons. These nuclear weapons cannot save us. The only thing they can do is so completely destroy us that we may not even remember that we ever lived. We've got to do something to make this new century important. And these young people must unite in a pattern of personal integrities. They must recognize that the future of the nation, and to a large measure the entire future of the world, depends on young people waking up, standing up, and doing that which is necessary. We think of the patriot who goes out and gets himself shot in Vietnam. We are interested now in the patriot who goes out, works, and maybe suffers to keep the light of integrity burning in his own hometown. We must start with 2000. We must start with the 21st century with the determined effort that we will not pass through another century of failure. Everything that it brings us bankruptcy, war, destruction, and hate, all these things are failures. The idea that we can finally compete our way into security is foolish. There will be wars and rumors of wars, but the end will not be yet unless we stop it. And we've got to stop it by changing our own nature. We've got to be less self-centered and more truth-centered. We've got to be more willing to work hard for what we need rather than to try to chisel something out of it. We've got to do the things ourselves that we say need doing. And we can do that definitely by dedication to a good, solid moral code. Now, this won't hurt anybody very definitely. Most parents will be delighted to know what their children are doing and how their children are reacting to problems. If the parent isn't reacting constructively in some way, then the child may have to lead the parent. But it is definite that the only way that we can make the next century worth living in is to begin now with the young people who are going to make up its citizenry and getting them ready for the job. And the only way we can get them ready is to get them to get themselves ready. The idea that there's someone standing over us with a stick or a bomb or something is foolish. All of the great gains of history have been made peacefully and kindly by strong, simple people who believed in the truth and lived it. Now we need a generation of those coming up now. And I think we've got them. I think they're coming tremendously. The first thing that is helping us is the example of the 19th and 20th. From 1900 to 1999, we have a practically solid picture of trouble. We can turn these young people in any direction and show them the inevitable consequence of doing it wrong. We can also see how, as they go along, they are forcing their own children and their children's children into ways of misery and death simply because we insist on remaining selfish, self-centered creatures with no thought for anybody but ourselves. Young people today must keep their bodies clean so that they can grow up and do something with their bodies. They must keep their minds open so they can learn new things. They must keep their hearts open to love the good and to cling to all the things that are worthwhile in life. Now, this isn't a big deal. There are primitive people down in Borneo and Indonesia that have done this. Sure, they live in a simple life. They live in a tree or something of that kind. They have none of the conveniences that we have. But when one of them is sick, the others all get together and help. When one of them is in need, the others all cooperate. And it was the same thing in the Great American League, the League of the Iroquois, the League of the Nations. And when anyone was sick or troubled, they came forward and helped. They did everything that was necessary. And the League was political also. What we call a sachem in American Indian is what we now know politically as a senator. And the sachems were the rulers of the Great League of the Iroquois. They were the a higher house of Congress. And who elected them? This was cute. We've forgotten it, but it might be good to remember. All of these senators could be voted on only by women. Women elected the government. Then when the government got ready to have great meetings, they gathered in the tent or in the little cabin where the sachems gathered, and they had a few quiet words of prayer, and then they said, now the session is open. Now we consider the needs of the 5 tribes. Now we need meet the needs of all those of the red people who live east of the Mississippi. It's a big tribe. So we go to the first thing. Should we do so-and-so? And they all sit very quietly. And one of them presents a bill that we should do a certain thing. Then the secretary or head of it gets up and says, our brother here has suggested this bill. Now we want you to all vote on this bill. All except the man who puts it up. The man who puts up the bill cannot vote upon his own bill. This stopped a lot of funny business. And these people were wandering around in bearskins and beadwork and a few feathers. Then, the second time, one of the sachems said he wanted to talk. All right, the brother has the floor. And it must be remembered that when he has the floor, he must not accuse anyone of anything, disparage anyone of anything, but present such facts as he regards necessary to be corrected as facts. And they would plan out what they were going to do. And then one of them said, I want to go across the country to a tribe on the other side, and I must have protection against wild Indians in between. Satan said, that is possible. So they gave him the belt, a wampum belt of beadworks and shell. And this wampum belt was the peace belt of the Iroquois League. And with that, an Indian from any tribe could travel anywhere in the United States area with perfect safety. No one would consider doing him any harm. And as a special reward for his wonderful work with the Indians, they gave William Penn a peace belt so that he could go anywhere. And the peace belt had a red man and a white man shaking hands as a symbol of eternal peace. This was so good. You know, the Indians loved Penn. You don't really know how much they loved him. But they had great troubles because they didn't know what to do with him when he died. He wasn't an Indian. He couldn't go to an Indian heaven. And yet they had to take care of him. He had been good to all of them. They had to make sure that he had the best of everything in the afterlife. So they worked it all out. They built a little cabin right at the entrance of the Indian paradise, where he could sit on a chair and watch his Indian brothers go in and out, and they all call out and visit with him, and would know him and remember him forever. Now these are foolish, stupid children's ideas, perhaps, but they are greater than war, and more wonderful than crime, and certainly a greater blessing to humanity than cupidity and decay. Everywhere we're going to have to dream some good dreams, create some new circumstances because they're necessary, be kinder, be wiser, and in every way that we can, remember the great problems that we all face together. This world is shrinking. Our natural resources are becoming fewer. Every effort is being made to tie up, bind up, and exploit our remaining natural resources. This is a great mistake. So we'd like to see young people starting out in this new generation a little different than the one we've just seen. We would like to have them think in terms of planning good lives together, planning a marriage that's going to stick, planning children who are going to be loved and treated well, planning the problems of responsibility to raise and maintain homes under a strenuous economic problem, remaining in all things faithful to principles and wise enough to teach them to the young. The founder of our public school system was a Moravian minister by the name of Comenius. He has been recognized, he's known throughout the whole educational world. But Comenius had a very simple philosophy of life. He said the most important of all schooling is the mother school. The mother school is what the child learns at its mother's knee before it ever goes to school. We have to change our ways, or we will not change our destinies. We will have to think straight, or we're going to be in very bad trouble. But this seems as though it was a gift from heaven, that there should be this century coming up, the 21st century. Nearly 500 years ago, Nostradamus, a great prophet and astrologer and astromancer of his day, made a prophecy. He said that at the end, or near the end, of the 20th century, there would be a great confusion upon the face of the earth, that the sky might be black with weapons and machines carrying death, but that the great effort to destroy would not succeed. Truth would come, and after the end of the 20th century, the Paraclete would come, and that was the great teacher. After the violence, there would come a beautiful and noble being, a wonderful leader, a great soul, who would bring together the peoples of the earth into the brotherhood of mankind under the tender governing of the fatherhood, motherhood of God. So that the old prophets of old prophesied the importance of this 21st century. And as it comes nearer and nearer, these children of today will be in their early 20s when this century comes. They will be right at the age when they want to start doing things, building things. They want to be honest. They want to be true. They want to have an opportunity to do what is right. We must do all we can to prepare them by giving them a proper education. And then we must do all we can to support them by standing behind them in the good things they try to do, and recognize that a great life is not one in which there is a great emphasis upon material success, but a great realization of a life lived for the common benefit of all that lives. We have to think about these things. If we do not think about them, we are sometime going to be very sorry. We must get to work ourselves as individuals and build the way we want to go. As we grow up, we will then become the legislators. We will come in and do the work that will be appointed to us by our own experience. We can then build better governments, better nations, better families. We can do all the things we've dreamed of, but we've got to do it ourselves. So I think that all of us should recognize this present coming century that we're coming into now as the greatest opportunity we'll ever have to make a good world better, to get rid of the things that are not right, straighten out things, lift ourselves out of the despotism of selfishness into the clear light of friendship, brotherhood, and equality. We are theoretically intended to be a free people, but no one can be free who is subject to his own ignorance. The only way we can be free, really, is to be free of the over-influence of other people. And we are over-influenced because we do not know ourselves. If we know what is right ourselves, no one else can over-influence us. We cannot be easily hoodwinked. It is very difficult to cheat an honest person, but the individual who is corruptible for a profit is at the basis of all our miseries. So we'd like all these young people to think as much as they can of a new generation and a new world rising up from the ashes of the dead, phoenix-like, a new civilization of the young, to build upon the future, build into the years and centuries to come, the foundations of a nation and a world that can endure in peace among the histories of mankind. We have a long history of trouble. Let's begin a great history of success, peace, chivalry, and understanding. Let us be able to look each other in the eye and say, God bless you. We have the power to build worlds, the wisdom to govern them, and the divine right to inherit the earth in good condition. Our right, duty, and inevitable purpose must be to see that the generations that will inhabit the 21st century will have the opportunity to fulfill their destiny.